Okay, so now let's actually learn how to find slope. We know what slope looks like if it's positive, negative, 0, or undefined, but now we actually have to find that number of what m actually equals for positive and negative sloping lines. We have to actually put a number on it. We get to use this handy-dandy little formula to help us find slope, rise over run. So essentially, that's y over x. And what I would really like for you to do is just to remind yourself that rise, it could be up or down, and then run is left or right. So on tests when I was in middle school, I actually wrote this part instead of rise over run. It's totally up to you, but we're going to see how that helps us here in a second. Okay, so when you're finding slope, you always need 2 points. It can be any 2 points on your graph. It doesn't matter which 2 you choose. So looking at your graph, I notice that there's a bunch of points along this line. I'm going to use this point right here and this point right here. It does not matter, again, which one you use. It's totally up to you. But what our goal is we always start with your bottom. Oh, sorry. That's not right. You always start with your left point. In this case, it's the bottom left, but that won't always be the case. So whatever the left point is that's where you're going to start. So I need to rise from this first point to the second one. And what I mean by that is we just need to get on the same line as the second point. So from here, I'm going to go up 1, 2 times to be on the same line. So that is my rise, and I write that at the top of my fraction. Now that I'm on the same line, I now have to run 1 time to get to my actual point, and that is my run. So if we were to simplify this, 2 over 1, my slope, my m, equals 2. 2 divided by 1 is 2. If you need to watch that part again, go ahead and rewind and replay it. So now let's try to figure out what function matches this graph. We know that m is before our x. Our slope is before our x, like we already talked about. So I'm going to rewrite this, y equals mx plus b. And we know that m equals 2. So take a second and think, which one of these 4 options do you think could be the equation or the function that matches our graph? Okay, hopefully we picked letter C because there's our 2. In front of our x, our slope is 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on down to the next equation or the next example. Okay, same ideas apply, so we just need 2 points. So I'm going to take any 2 points. I'm going to use this one right here and this one right here. Remember that rise over run, it was up or down and left or right. It doesn't always have to be up. We start at the left point, which is right there. And to get to my second point, this time I'm going down 2 times to get to the same point. So I have my 2 here, but if I went down, that's a negative 2. And now my run, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps to get over to my 2. Slope must always be written in simplest form. So if I simplify that, I end up with a negative 1/2. Before we move on to the multiple choice part, I want to remind you of something, and I really want you writing this down. When I say that m equals negative 1/2, we need to remember that that means the same thing as a negative 1 over 2 and a 1 over negative 2. So you notice here that you actually can write your negative in front as your numerator or as your denominator. They all equal the same thing. Okay, so it's very important when you're choosing answer choices later on the formative especially, but also as we move forward in this unit. It doesn't matter where the negative is, but only one number is negative, okay? So now let's move back to the function part for the graph that we just found the slope of. So I know that my slope is a negative 1/2, and I know that my equation is y equals mx plus b. So which one of these options would have a negative 1/2 as my m? And hopefully you picked letter B because there's my m hanging out in front of the x. Okay, we're going to do one more example together. You'll do 4 by yourself. So now that we have talked about slope, we now are going to be given lines and you have to find your slope yourself. Sometimes the points are not going to be given to you. So we have to look and see, we have to find 2 points that are perfectly crossing at an intersection point. So I see this one's perfect, and I see that this one's perfect. So I'm going to choose those 2 points. If it's not perfect, it's not a valid point for you to choose. And by that I mean, if you look at number 2, I couldn't choose this point right here because that's not crossing at a perfect intersection point. Okay. All right, so going back to number 1, starting at your left point, let's rise to get to our top point. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm going to run 1, 2, 3. Okay. So for this example, my m, and it gives you this up here, my m is 5/3 because that does not reduce. And remember, we always leave it as a fraction. And if necessary, an improper fraction. Do not make it a mixed number. Okay? All right, so now I'd like for you to do the highlighted problems 2, 3, 4, and 5 by yourself. And remember what we talked about with horizontal and vertical lines, what the slope is for those. And you can go back to thinking about slope dude if you need to. So pause the video, because when you come back, the answers will be here. Okay, so here are the answers for 2, 3, 4, and 5. For number 2, remember we need to reduce, so it's a negative 1/3. For number 3, it was a flat line, so it was a slope of 0. For number 4, it was a vertical line, so it was a slope of undefined. And finally, for number 5, we rose 5 and we ran 3, similar to number 1. So we had a slope of 5/3 and we leave it like that. So if you would like to continue to do some of these problems, you are more than welcome to. The answers will be on Google Classroom later. But you can take a little mental break for a second, and then there's one last video for you.